Well, we're back, episode 51. Pete, how you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good.
Good. Being brought to you live from my dungeon office and your dungeon office.
That's
And
right.
yeah, let's just jump into our next topic on the issues that leader face.
Sure. So, have you ever walked into a room or had somebody walk into a room, and maybe you're in a meeting, or it's a party or something like that, or you're just in conversation, and they walk up to you and just make some sort of comment or a joke, or even just start talking, and it's very obvious to you and maybe everybody else around you that they have no idea what's going on at all.
Mm.
Been there. Sometimes that's been me, and that's super embarrassing. Um, maybe you've been keeping up this conversation and you've been in the conversation, right? And then you respond and you think that you're saying something in keeping with the where the conversation is going, but they look at you like you got three heads. I've
Yeah.
had that happen too. Um, or maybe you laughed at a joke that wasn't a joke. You ever done that?
Yeah. Oh, that one
Really?
hurts.
It
Oh
does.
yeah.
It
They like
sucks
laugh.
so bad.
They say something, you laugh, and they're like, "Oh, I'm not joking." I'm like, "Oh,
Yes. I knew that, totally knew that. You
yeah,
feel like a complete moron, right?
yeah,
That's I think those are really good examples. I think all of us identify with this of not being able to really understand what's going on or not really being able to read the room.
yeah." No, exactly. And one of the things that pops into my head, a moment. I've got a lot of these moments. This is why this is a good topic. Is
That's right.
because like I've got stories for days on this. But I remember one time going out when I was out in the field doing electrical work, and um, I was at a cow farm, right? And the there was some stray voltage happening. Okay, so voltage in the ground somewhere, probably going to like a cow's water trough or something like that got loose, and the cows were like basically bucking anytime they got to a certain point on the ground. So
Makes sense.
I'm walking out there with this farmer, and we're walking over to it, and I'm telling him, kind of explaining, like, yeah, I think this is what's gonna happen, is what is happening or whatever, and I think it's hitting the cows and stuff. And he was like, so stray voltage in the ground, like that's a bad thing. And I just started laughing, like that was the dumbest thing you. And he looked at me and he goes, I hired you because I'm not the electrician. I was like, oh, my bad. Like,
Shit.
he was right. He was right. I shouldn't.
Right?
But I laugh like, yeah, that's a bad thing. Um,
Obviously.
right. But this episode's going to be a tad less tangible than normal ones, but not less understandable. Like being able to read a room, to pick up on the tone of the conversation or the nuance of body language is a gift for sure.
Yeah.
But it's something we all can continually get better at. And we really should lean in and try to get better at. So, thinking that conversation is just about what you say and all that matters, like, is I said it, and it doesn't matter. Like, if it didn't work, it's not my fault because I said it.
Mm.
Like, I feel like that's a problem in this as well, is that
Yeah.
you just sprout whatever you believe. And then, well, I don't know why they didn't understand. It's not my fault. Um, you didn't explain it well. And reading a room, understanding people, explaining it well wasn't even the point, right? Like it's not the point if you don't understand where the room is at. Like this is akin to taking a sunflower seed and putting it in the middle of a asphalt road and then being like, why didn't it work? The seed's got all the power. It should be able to grow. This is stupid.
Right.
Why isn't it happening? That's what we do when we think that just because I said something and it didn't hit, like that's their fault. Reading a room is about being able to understand what work needs to be done to convey the information, to land the point, to help bring value. If you cannot read a room, then you're going to be that person who's just throwing seeds into the middle of an asphalt road and not understanding. You got to do some work and make sure that you've understood the environment, you've understood the the tone of the room and whether what you're saying is even appropriate. Okay, because there are times that we just say things and we miss kind of that appropriate perspective, right? So
Yeah.
I think walking into a room should take a little bit more delicacy and well, like have you ever walked in a room that you got to the door and on the door it said danger and then said something else?
No.
Like, okay, well, I have, okay, Peter. Damn,
Not an
dude. Come on, leave
electrician.
the room. I'm looking for
Yeah,
I'm looking for some feedback. Gee whiz. All right, yeah. So if you can't tell, we do have an electrical commercial industrial company that
right.
Peter has never been out in the field, apparently.
I've been in the
Well,
field.
Peter. Well, Peter, no, apparently not.
I get my
Peter,
cute hard hat on,
sometimes
and
sometimes on doors it says danger, construction,
oh,
or beware of dog, you know?
yeah, I've seen
Thanks,
those in
man.
movies.
Good. You've seen those in movies. Okay, well, the
Yeah,
movies were based off of a thing called real life too.
cool,
So,
good story.
anyway, I think reading a room, like when you go through one of those doors, and I'm going to just kind of help bring context to you, Peter. When you
Cool.
walk through one of those doors that says danger something, your antenna kind of come up. And as you're walking through, you're kind of getting this, hey, what am I looking for? Where, like, you're reading a room differently because you know there's a potential for danger. I think being able to read a room well is almost, it would almost be good for us to have that mental perspective of, hey, danger ahead.
Yeah, so just to kind of bring it to perspective for me too, just so you know, I have been in situations where I've had to read danger in the room. But there was no sign. It was more of I stepped out of. I used to drive a armored car and
Mm.
pick up cash. So for me, the danger was entering or exiting the vehicle. There was immediate danger all the time, and we did have to learn to read the room for all the people in it, what was going on, be observant on what's going on. I wish that I did have this sign that said danger situation, right, or
Yeah.
danger rough conversation. So I
You,
totally get that.
you've literally seemed to have done every job. I don't, I think on this podcast, you have at least dropped like
Right.
10 jobs you've done.
The only thing I've not done that I can think of off the top of my head that most people have and would identify with is retail and restaurants. I've never done food service or retail. So
Yep, I've done both of those.
okay,
Anyway,
yeah,
but like the whole thing of having that danger sign or that like walking into a situation kind of like you're talking about and understanding that there's a potential for danger is that you're more sensitive to the surroundings. The surroundings do become part of your awareness. You start to think like if we're not careful when we walk into those places and we don't read the sign of danger on the door and we just kind of like roughly walk in, like we're gonna do danger to our reputation.
hmm,
You're gonna do danger to other people. And I don't necessarily mean physical. I mean like you could like cause people to not feel safe in their environment because you're the
yeah,
bull in a china shop, right? And you could do danger to your customer and knowing how they feel. Like there have been so many times that like we'll go on job sites and believe me, I know like I've got slicked back hair and waxed eyebrows. I'm just kidding. I don't have waxed eyebrows. But anyway, my point is like when I go like where construction does have a tends to have a rougher demeanor, right? Or a
yeah,
rougher tone or a rougher voice. But I think the people who really stand out are those who know when to use that and when not to use that.
mm,
And the ability to like see who else is around you because it isn't important to the product. We talk about all the time that your people, the people in your team are not a means to your product. They are part of the product. And
yeah,
when people can realize that and read the room and you see a customer who's coming out onto the job site, yeah, maybe we've got to be a little more careful. Take the attack on our approach. Maybe not have the phallic jokes and other things like that going on at the
yes,
time. Like take the attack off. And I've had to be talked to about this out in the field. I've had to help other people on our team understand like
yeah,
you are not less you by taking that off. You know what I mean? Like
hmm,
we get so used to hearing our own voices in our head, and if we're not careful, we can do like we basically just haven't censored ourselves. Is really what it
hmm,
is. We hear ourselves in our head all the time, and we don't. When we hear ourselves in our head, we don't censor ourselves. When we get out places, we can't just only be in our head thinking that that's the environment we're playing in. Like we probably do need to censor ourselves. And like I said, censoring yourself is not making you less authentic. And I think that's a hard struggle for people. Like, well, I'm gonna be me and me's me. And like if I don't just get to talk and do everything I want to do, like then this is ridiculous. Like I'm not saying that the point is not to be you. But you're gonna offend people. You're gonna hurt
Yeah.
people. You're gonna trample over what they're working with too. I
Yeah.
am not, and I want to be careful here because this is a fine line here, and I'm not trying to go into some crazy woke side of things here, but I'm not saying the point is to not offend people. I'm really not. Like we're going
Right.
to offend people. That is
Yeah.
very, very likely to happen, possibly daily. But let's not do it out of ignorance. Let
Yes.
there's a time to say what you need to say, and it needs to be said, and it offends people. Then that's kind of okay. But that's not all the time, and that's not because you have a hard time censoring what you're saying. Okay, there's a time that you can cut up with your friends. There's a time you can say the jokes or speak the way you want to, but grandma's 80th birthday is not that place,
That's
okay?
right.
Or, at a funeral, being able to tell all the stories about you, fighting in this war and doing these,
Yeah.
that might not be it, okay? Like, take the attack off. It's okay to censor yourself. You're not censoring you, you're censoring your approach to the situation.
Hmm.
This makes me think, actually, this is where I was like, I know I need to start censoring myself a lot better. Um, because you stay in environments where you're not censoring yourself, or you're going to go into new
Yes.
environments and not censor yourself. You do
Hmm.
need to have some of that. And I'm not just talking real quick. I'm not just saying like don't cut like the cussing and like the jokes. Like they're censoring
Right.
the tone, right? Like
Hmm.
having a really aggressive tone. Well, and you go into a situation where there are a bunch of little kids, maybe don't have the
Yep.
really aggressive tone. Um,
Yep.
you know, somebody's about to walk off a cliff or fall out of a window, do have the aggressive tone. That is a
Yes.
great time for it. But
Right.
knowing that, and so censoring yourself is not just don't cuss. It's more than that. But this makes me remember a time where I was teaching some middle schoolers how to do electrical work. Okay. So I love doing this. I love going and being around kids and like helping them catch vision and catch purpose and connect to, like, if they're mechanically minded, connect to electrical work. And so what we were doing for this was installing switches, right? Like understanding how wire connects to install. Oh, I'm sorry. I think it was a receptacle. Install receptacles.
Okay.
And on a receptacle, there's a brass screw, there's a silver screw, and there's a green screw. Okay, I'm teaching everyone electrical right now. If you're
Yes.
not paying attention, you're like, I don't know how to wire up a receptacle. You're getting the process right now.
That's right. Hey, I actually know this one, so I know where you're headed. But
Good,
I do. I
good.
actually know
So
this one.
on that's good to hear. The ground wire, which is the one that is we call it the like just in case wire. Like if something electrical hits metal, the ground wire takes the electricity back to ground, trips the breaker. It's that kind of a thing. So the ground wire goes on the green screw. The white wire is your neutral wire. This is the wire that takes electricity back to source. Okay, so that goes on the silver terminal. And the black wire, which is your hot or your constant electricity to the source, goes to the black screw or to the brass screw. Okay, so it goes through on usually a black, red, blue. I'm not going to get too into electrical here. But anyway, we have a phrase um, in the electrical field to help people remember to hook the black up to the right terminal and not to put the black conductor on the silver conductor. That phrase is black on brass saves your ass. Okay? Black on brass saves your ass. I'm with middle schoolers teaching them how to install a receptacle. I've taught for 10 plus years in the electrical trade at trade schools and out in the field. I mean, I've been doing this for a while. That verbiage is still part of my vernacular. And so even in the trade schools, that's what I said. Okay. You know where this is going. And
Yep.
so there I am with 15, 20 plus middle school kids, and I'm teaching them and I'm connecting. They're enjoying it. They're laughing. This is a great time. And I said, just remember, kids, black on brass, say, and I look back in the back of the room, and the teacher's eyes got really big. And I realized she knew this phrase, which was great. I was like, this girl knows home improvement. She knows how to hook up electricity. This is wonderful.
That's
But
awesome.
halfway through, I went black on brass saves, and my eyes got that big. I went black on brass, your life will last. Like I got lucky.
Oh,
And she just
damn.
started, teacher in the back of the room just starts cracking up.
Oh my
Students
god.
look back confused. But my point is, like, you should be paying attention to your surroundings. Yes, they would have known how to hook up a receptacle and never forgot black on brass saves your ass.
That's
Okay, I
right.
know they would have, but that was not the time for me to give that little quick-witted saying. So reading the room is so much about knowing at any given moment. Okay, so it's knowing a few things. Now we're gonna walk into different situations, different rooms. You got to be able to know first off who's your audience. Like who's
Mm.
is it, a customer, a teammate, a child? For the love of goodness, a child. Be careful.
Yes.
And not just who are they, but like what do they want in that time. Part of
Mm.
picking up on tone of a room is knowing like its tone is almost to be matched at times. It's not to be counteracted. I'm not saying never, but like going to a funeral is rough. It should be. It's somber at times. It should be. That's okay. Like that is not a bad thing. Um because we're all having those emotions. Like this is where, like, you know, you hear the phrase misery loves company. Like happiness loves company too.
Yeah.
Like curiosity and creativity love company too. I think it's just the idea that the emotional tone of a room at times wants people to engage in that tone. And
Mm.
so I think that's the thing we got to be able to understand is like who's the audience and what do they want, right?
Mhm.
What are they needing in that moment? Now this there is an art to managing a room that I think we might actually talk about next episode is how do we go
Yeah.
manage and dig into like leading a room and leading that
Mm.
tone. But the first part of that is you're never going to be there if you can't read a room and read the tone in a room.
Yeah.
The next thing you need to think through is really like what do you need to convey? Like and what is the best way to accomplish that? So and it might be say nothing at all. You know what I mean? Like it's not always
Yeah.
do something, say something. Sometimes it's yeah, you don't need to say it. And then also part of that is when should you say it? Like
Mm.
when is the right time to say what you need to say slash do you really need to say it?
Yeah.
Okay, we don't need to know every opinion you have at every point in the day all the time. I know it's hard. Like I'm classic overshare. I want everyone to know everything about me. But remember, like, we're not the main character in this story.
Mm.
We're not. Okay. We're all living life. We're all doing
Yeah.
these things. It's not about you. You don't need to be the one who's um, always sharing about themselves. I think about Jen Ramo. I think she
Mm.
is clutch. And we've had Jen Ramo twice on our podcast because she just dang, right?
Yeah.
She is clutch at reading a room. Like she blows me
Yeah.
away when
She
I'm
is.
with her in any situation. I know, and she's an 8 on the Enneagram like me, and which is really hard to be like we don't like to be phony at all. Like it feels inauthentic. But she'll walk into a room and just owns it and still authentically stays her. And she
Mm.
walks into the room and just knows where things are. Like, in fact, I remember our first meeting that we ever had with her when we were like, this is when we were like, I think we're gonna look for someone to help us implement EOS and traction and stuff. And so she
Yeah.
came in and I still remember one of our first like meetings that we were having, and we were just talking, and I started cussing because we were in our
Yes, that's
office, we
right.
were doing our thing, and I started cussing because like for me, I'm like, hey, in times of vulnerability and where we're gonna dig into something that's very emotional and personal to me, I'm gonna cuss because I don't want to have to censor myself and my emotions on those things. Okay, so again, that's me reading the room, knowing what I want about a certain situation, and feeling the permission to do so. And I remember right away after I cussed, she smiled and she said, "Thanks so much for breaking that barrier
Yes.
of is cussing okay?" She's like,
Yeah.
"I really effing appreciate it." And I was just
Yes.
like, from there, but she was just so good. Like I would have had
Yeah.
no clue because
Yeah.
she knew read the room, wait for the room to show you like what are the rules for the game. And she
Yeah.
just did such a good job. Jen, if you're hearing this, way to go. You blow me away and like you've helped me a ton in that concept. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I mean, that's a perfect example too of how we can't handle each situation the same, right? As we walk into rooms, those rooms are going to be different. If they had labels on them, like you were talking about earlier, danger, rough conversation, or danger, confrontation, danger, friends, whatever, right? We don't get those
Friends fly
cues.
down. Got it.
Okay, cool. Cool. Friends fly out. Yes. Yeah, all those things are different situations, and how we handle them, we have to handle each one of them differently. So we can't just walk into the room or into a conversation and just assume it's always going to be the same. That's why this is so important, is to learn, and to grow in that learning of these soft skills, this communication, leadership, when it comes to walking into that room. Because as we're gonna, like you mentioned earlier, we're gonna try to get into maybe next time talking about how to manage the room, right?
Mm,
But you can't manage something that you don't know what's going on, right?
mm.
It would be terrible if you walked into a situation and tried to take over, but you don't actually know what's happening.
Yeah.
I've been there before. So
Mhm.
I'm trained in theater. I think I've mentioned that before. I've got a degree in theater. I've done
Before or
directing.
after the armored car?
I was actually before. Yeah, a ways before actually, but yes.
From
Um,
theater boy to armored car.
Actually, theater boy to what did I do first? Security guard at the airport.
Yeah, there we
So
go. Perfect.
it's pretty right. It's pretty normal, right? Yeah. So anyway, I'm trained in theater. So there have been times I've walked into a rehearsal room and I've read what's going on, and I started to take over, and then very quickly realized that the person in there had it under control. Um, and they were actually progressing. They were just allowing the person on stage to have a moment of pause or
Mm,
feel the emotion or whatever it is. And I thought, oh, nothing's happening and we have to get this moving, right? So
mm,
I didn't read the room properly. But that's why it's so important to realize we can't treat each one of these situations the exact same way. And it's pointless for us to try to do that. We've got to learn to do this. I think it's important that we talk about too, that as we go into these, um, you're going to have, I kind of feel like this is a movie. I would love to do a movie on this, but different or multiple outcomes based on how you interact or react, right? And based on your tone, your posture, your thoughts, like all these things come into play to create the situation or the outcome of that situation, right? So if you walk into a room, and you see people, nobody's talking out loud and they're all sitting in their own little groups, you're immediately telling a story of what's happening in that room. The reality is that may not be true. It may be true, but it may not be, right? You may come up with this story in your head that everybody just got out of a fight and they're all pissed off at each other, and you walk in and start, try to help them all communicate better and work out their problems, when the reality is they're just a group of people who don't know each other and they're just trying to get to know each other. Your response to that is completely different. And then flip it around too. When you walk in a room, people are watching you too, right? Probably more often than we realize, people look at us, and read our expression, they read our body language, they listen to the tone that we say things to others, not necessarily directly to them, and they're making assumptions. They're reading us. They're reading how we're interacting with others, and that's something to think of too as we read the room, knowing that our responses when we bring them up, they're going to be interpreted as well, and learning how to get to a point where you understand what's going on in the room and you understand how you're going to be, for the most part, received is going to be crucial to understanding how to read the room and then moving forward, how to, as we've kind of alluded to, how to manage the room.
Yeah. Yeah. It really, I think just the key indicator here, like we talked about this being less tangible. Sure, there are things we can do,
Yeah.
things we need to know, but really, I think just being aware
Yeah.
is one of the most important things. In you as you're in the room, think. Think before you take any action. Think before you speak. Think before you until you know what's going on in the room. That is so wise. You do such service to people when you allow the room to kind of show you what's going on. Walking in, like you maybe not everyone can't do this, but like when you walk into a room, the tone will tell you what's going on. When there's been a fight, you didn't have to witness the fight to walk into that room and just know, like, there's been a fight here. Like something's happened. I can just sense it. Um, you know, you got to get a lay of the land. You got to be able to just understand what the environment is before you start to wreak havoc or help others like help others feel comfortable about the room too. Um, it's kind of hits close to home for me. I want to. We put our dog down of 12 years. We had to put our dog down last week, and in the midst of that, as we were going through it, like it was hitting me. It was hard. Um, when Lindsay and I went to the vet office, uh, that's when it got real, right? And so we're in the I don't know exam room with
Yeah.
Watson, and I'll tell you, I could feel the sense and the weight of everything. Those the veterinarians did such an amazing job,
Mm,
and when they came
good.
into the room, they talked to us about our options, talked to us about what was going on, looked at Watson, checked everything up, and they said, "Yeah, we're with you. We know this is hard. We're so sorry. Here are the things we can do. You can be a part of this process. You don't have to be a part of this process. We just want to make sure you
Mm,
guys, you know, we can give him a sedative first, and then we'll give him the other injection that will stop his heart." And it was we're having a hard time even knowing what to do. We're just struggling. And so here we are. They're like, "Hey, we're going to give you some room to talk about this."
mm,
They walked out of the room. Lindsay and I talk about it. They came back and they're like, we were like, if the sedative puts him to sleep before we'll walk out because we don't need to see him necessarily go. But at the same time, like they're like, okay, totally fine. And so we're sitting there and they gave him the sedative and he just hung around and the doctor's like, it's your guys' call, whatever you want to do. If you want to stay here. And Watson's eyes are still open and Lindsay is like, I
mm.
can't leave. And it was just like,
Yeah.
okay, like that's totally fine, we're gonna stay. And we just stayed there with him through the whole process. And it was so like I just was so thankful for how well those doctors read the room. Those
Yeah.
vets looked at the whole situation. They knew the struggle, they knew the pain. They're in it day in and day out. They understood how to help us feel good about the room. If they would have walked in and be like, "Get out, we got to do this," blah blah blah, like, which
Mm,
can happen and does happen. That's why we have
yeah.
horror stories of these things
Right.
because people don't know how to read a room. They honored our dog. They honored us by the way that they read a room, and we could not. And I mean, I'm here on a podcast telling about this story because how well they did at showing empathy, understanding the situation, understand saying the right things at the right time. So kind of to that, be flexible. when you come into a room, and we keep saying come into a room like it's an actual room. This is a proverbial room. It's just a
Yeah.
situation. It's just a group of people or whatever. But be flexible. This is not about becoming a chameleon in the room. Like I got to become whatever the room is. It's just understanding what's your environment at the moment and knowing what the subtle rules are, because there do kind of become rules of engagement, rules to the
Mhm.
game. And like honestly, kind of like what should I be wearing when I go into this
Yes.
scenario? Those are smart ideas too. Okay, so those are just things like to kind of think through before you just jump in and almost cause more damage than you need to.
Yeah, and this is not it's not something that you're gonna pick up overnight either, right? It's something I'm sure I'm so glad to hear that your experience with those vets was good because I've heard so many horror stories, but I imagine it's not their first time, right? And that
Right.
sucks. It absolutely sucks. But it shows that they've walked through this. They've been through the situations. They've been probably through many situations, different responses, and they've acquired that ability. They've acquired that skill to read the room. I'm still not great at this. I know that. There are times when I think I've got it. I walk into a meeting and I'm like, man, it's gonna be a great meeting. And 3 seconds in, it turns out to be not what I'm thinking. Might be a great meeting still, but it's not what I'm thinking. Or I walk into a meeting or about to walk into a meeting and my brain is just telling me these stories of, man, this is gonna suck. They're gonna yell at me. I know these situations are rough. I had one a couple months ago where I had to go to a job site and I was dreading it because there had been some conflict over certain things that need to be done with the work, and I was there to basically show them that what they were asking for was unreasonable, and not part of the work that we should be doing. And I was really nervous because the interactions I had had before were not the greatest, and I walked in very defensive, ready to dispute anything, and it turned out to be an absolute nothing conversation. Um, we got talking about, it and they were like, "Okay, sounds good." Immediately disarmed and taken
Yeah.
aback, but just again, proof that I still need to work on this. This is not something that just happens overnight. You learn it, right? And we've said this a couple times. I just kind of want to clarify. We've talked about tone of voice, and we're going to kind of get into this here a little bit more. But your tone of voice, we're not talking about like the pitch or the height or the depth of where your voice lands, but how you're speaking. It's how the character of what you're saying comes through in your words, either written or spoken, right? So it's your tone of voice is how you're being portrayed when you speak. Um, and so kind of a funny story about this in communication actually happened this morning. Um, and that was we were in the process of working with a consultant to get a logo created for us. And I made a request for something to be added to it. I wanted a lightning bolt put on there. And I was thinking something like what's in one of our logos has a stylized, almost cartoonish lightning bolt in one of our
Hmm.
logos. And that's what I was thinking. So when I communicated that, I didn't clarify that, but I said it. And the guy sent back um, this logo, which is awesome, but it has real lightning bolts shooting through the logo animation. And it just, to me, like it shows again, I didn't read the situation. This guy is doing a great job, but he's trying to get done quickly. And I need to be clear on that. I didn't quite read the fact that he was going to jump on it that quick and just kind of finish it up.
Yeah, I do think tone as well, though. There is something to like it isn't always how your tone was brought about,
Mm,
like the how heavy, like how low it is or how high it is, like,
yeah.
but that does matter too. Like,
Mhm.
and I do think there's a part of us that does uniquely get this because when you have a baby in your hands, you feel this, hi there, how you doing?
That's true.
Like how what's
It's a good
going
point.
on? Like we do kind of pick up on some of that stuff. So and when you're like ready to fight, you kind of like get ready and like, yeah. So what's the problem? Like, what do we got to fix here?
Yes.
And that's me over. Yeah, my voice is never that deep, but you see the point that when we do that to our voice, and sometimes we need to realize that the tone of our voice actually does matter when it comes to that kind of transition.
That's a good point. Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up because that's not, I hadn't thought about that, but you're absolutely correct. Um, and that this is where we kind of transition into some um, this is a little more tangible items than we've kind of been talking about. But one thing that you can do to help learn more about the room or the situation is it's an old saying, but you've got two ears and one mouth, so double the listening, right? It's true.
Mm,
Listen more than you speak.
yeah.
If you're walking into a situation, the more you can learn about it, the better off you're going to be able to handle whatever situation comes up. So take that time to listen, right? Take the time to really gain what's going on in that room. We just talked about this in our last episode about listening versus hearing, and how to practice good listening skills and what that looks like. So if you've missed that and you're just jumping in now, go ahead, jump back and listen to that. The other part too that you can do is using your eyes, right? So while you're listening, also look around. See what the posture is of the people in the room, right? See how they're sitting, see how they're standing, see who they're talking to, who they're not talking to, where they're facing, where they're not facing, right? If everybody in the room is facing one direction, it's away from you, you're probably at the back of the room. And that's sometimes a good thing to know, right? If you walk in and everybody's looking at you, maybe you want to find a different
Oops.
entrance, or yeah, or you're the speaker and don't realize it, right? Maybe you're the guest speaker and just didn't realize it.
Yeah.
But take time to observe, take time to look around, take time to listen, assess everything before you just jump in and make assumptions about what's going on and try to do whatever, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I always, I've probably said this on this podcast. I don't know. But did you ever watch Boy Meets World?
No, I actually didn't.
Did you ever have a TV?
Actually, growing up, not really.
Oh my goodness. I love finding things out about you on the podcast. This is great. Okay. Boy Meets World. Let's start further back. Uh, I think in the 50s, they started coming out with these things called TVs. And
Okay,
TVs,
cool.
okay, you got that one? All right. So,
Got that one.
anyway, Boy Meets World, uh, excellent show. But there was early on in one of the seasons, one of the early seasons, there was this character named Corey, who's the main character. And he's really aloof, not paying attention a lot of the times. And he was in class, and Mr. Feeney was talking about how there are some people who are just so aloof and don't pay attention and stuff. And the whole class started turning around and looking at Corey,
Jeez.
and he's not paying attention. He's like looking down, doing something, and he
Yep.
looks up and he sees everyone looking at him, and he just looks around. He's like, "Do I got a booger?" Like he's just so. But I think like you're right, not understanding and observing the room. Like to me, that is like classic reading a room kind of moment.
Mhm.
But reading posture, reading expressions, being able to know what's going on, it takes that visually understanding what's going on. It takes listening to obviously Mr. Feeney, greatest teacher of all time. But it takes those things to rightfully read a room. I think
Yeah.
another thing is you got to have grace when reading a room. Okay?
Mhm.
Like I don't assume the worst in everyone. If you walk
Yeah.
into a room or walk into a situation as you did, Pete, with the assumption of what's going on,
Yeah.
you're going to be engaging in confirmation bias that is actively looking to prove your point,
Right.
not actively looking to know what's going on. You're actively looking to prove your point. That's not good. That's not good at reading a room because all you're going to do is be right. And being right is not the real deal. That's not what it's all about. This is why they're great videos about RBF, resting bitch face, okay? They're
Yes.
great videos about this
Yes, there
because
are.
RBF, I've got it. RBF is one of those things that like there's nothing else going on, but you just have that look. Well, you're
Yeah.
gonna walk in, you're gonna tell a story. That person hates me. You're gonna think that, oh, I don't want to be their friend of this, and you're gonna just like
Yeah.
cut off something completely. They had nothing really to do with it
Nope.
outside of having that condition of RBF. But like you gotta be able to go in and get curious. This makes me think of like Lindsay tells me all the time. She's like, "You when you think, Blake, I know you're thinking,
Mm,
or I know you're pissed off. It's one of those two. When you have that
yes.
face, it's only one of those two." And I'll catch myself as I'm deep in a thought or doing something for business, or I'm like writing, and I just I just have that face. And
Hmm.
Lindsay will walk in and be like, "You okay? Or are you working hard?"
Yes.
And I'm like, "Oh,"
Yes.
and I'll like I can just feel my forehead. Like, listen, I'm not trying
Relax.
to, okay? I'm not trying
Yes.
to. This is the way my face looks, okay? And it's the only one I got. So but I do think there are things we can do as well. Um, and still kind of within grace, uh, to take note of other cues too. I know right now we're wearing AirPods for the
Uh-huh.
sake of not having an echo on our mics. Okay, so that's the purpose. If you're ever like, why are they wearing AirPods and they're in two
Right.
different rooms? It's because we don't want an echo to come through and you'd
Yeah.
be like, this is the worst audio I've ever heard. We're doing it for you. Okay, I don't enjoy this. But anyway, when I go to a coffee shop and you see someone with AirPods in, chances are they do want left alone. Like there are some
Hmm.
cues that we can do things to make it obvious I I can't talk right now. Like I'm trying to do
Yes.
things. And this is one. Like you're at a coffee shop, a social place, a place that already has music. You don't need your music. It's a clear sign. I think we should probably let that person be. Um,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's always the case, but 90% of the time they're trying to focus, and that's the best way to do this. I'll go to coffee shops, and when I got to focus, I throw them in. I am not listening to anything. There's no music.
Yes.
They're not even on. I just
I
have
love
them in
it.
my ears so that people understand a potential social cue that I need to be about what I'm about in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that. I so I'm one of those weirdos that when I do go to a coffee shop, if I throw them in, I'm actually listening to something. It's usually because I don't like the music, or the music that is going on at that point is not stimulating me for my work or whatever it is at that point. So I'm a weirdo, but I'm with you. I see that all the time, and I see people even now, like in the grocery store, you'll see them with their AirPods in, and you know not to talk to them, don't say hi to them. They're gonna breeze through the checkout. They are
Yeah.
focused. They've got a plan and they got to get something done.
Yeah.
When you're talking in these situations, right? Talking about things to watch and things to take note of, take watching for other cues and things like that, but also be aware of how your voice sounds.
Mm.
um, it's easy kind of with RBF. We don't really always think about how our face sits. I know I have this too. My wife will always look at me like, are you okay? Like, yeah, why? And then I'll realize, oh, my face doesn't show that I'm
Yeah.
okay. But your tone and your emphasis is how we convey the feelings behind our words, right? So this is where you can say the same thing twice and have two completely different meanings. Just take for example the phrase "so good to see you." Right there, I said "so" was my emphasis, or I could say "so good to see you," or I could change it up a little bit and say "so good to see you." And that has a
Ooh.
negative, yeah, right. That has
Whoa.
a negative
Oh
but
no, that
positive
sounded
connotation.
lusty. Woo. Woo.
It can have many connotations depending on how you say it, right? So even in your reading of the room, listening to the emphasis or the tone of other people, and then also how you speak, this is going to come into play also when we're talking about managing a room. Like, how do you lead the room, right?
Mm.
And then for me to ask for feedback, right? You walked into a situation, you started speaking, you felt good about it, but then you've got a buddy who was there, and you go, hey, how did that go? And they look at you and go, oh, not great. Or, hey, that was perfect, it was great, you did a great job of walking in that situation, right? So perfect example of this, I was actually laughing yesterday as I was writing this down and thinking about it. We had a Zoom call meeting a couple weeks ago, and my wife had been sick at the time, and the kids were sick, I was not sleeping great. So I was running on almost no sleep whatsoever. And we got on the meeting, and it just felt like I was off. And I got to the end of it, and we closed out the meeting. Nothing great or big or anything like that happened. It wasn't super notable. But I talked to Blake later on that day, and I was like, "Hey man, did I sound like an asshole on that meeting earlier today?" And he looks at me and goes, "At what point?" To which I started dying laughing, realizing, okay, that was
What
the
point did
perfect answer.
you feel like you were an
Yes.
asshole? Because
Right.
it felt like all of it to me.
Yes, pretty much. And I realized, hey, I just was not controlling my
Yeah.
face, and I came across with that resting bitch face and sounded like an asshole. Not my intention whatsoever. Not at all. And I apologize to everybody that was in there, but that was a good opportunity for me to learn how I come across when I'm entering a situation or when I'm reading a room. As we grow as leaders, this is something that we need to grow in as well. We're going to have these situations where we need to be able to read the room or read the situation quickly. And it's really a lot about listening and observing, listening to what's being said, taking more time to listen than to talk, watching the room, observing what's going on, having grace as you walk into that situation or as you walk into a conversation. Keep your assumptions to a minimum. Know that you're going to create that story. So be on guard to not create a story that's unrealistic or is unreasonable. Give yourself that time to learn about what's going on. Be flexible as you go into the room. Listen to your tone. Ask for feedback after a situation. Thanks so much for joining us this week on the Ridgeline Leadership Podcast. See you guys next time.